Well, hello there, fine folks. I don't know, man. This is the third time I'm trying to make this video because it's just, for one, it's probably gonna bum you out, and I have some trepidation in how it'll affect my viewership, but it just happens to be the way I see the world and the way I think the world really is. And if you agree, some of these things you might already find obvious. Some of these things you may be like me, where you hear them and you go, oh shit, that's putting words and definition context to what I kind of have suspected all along. So what I'm going to discuss is my worldview of pessimism, and how, for a little history, I was first exposed to pessimism through the first season of True Detective, where, Matthew McConaughey's character is talking about it. And that, in a roundabout way, kind of led me to Thomas Ligotti's Conspiracy Against the Human Race, which I'm rereading right now because it is my favorite book on pessimism, and it is the only book with conspiracy in the title that I've read that ends with, "This is my opinions." How often do you hear that from anyone, especially someone who has the advantage of using a medium to convey their belief system? And I actually I was aware of Ligotti as a horror writer because he was kind of whispered in the recesses of cosmic horror as being like this great untapped secret amongst fans of Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror. Cosmic horror, for those of you who don't know, best way I could describe it is you take a narrative structure set in the real world where everything abides by natural laws, you have characters, and all of a sudden they're besieged by something that is enigmatic, malicious, seemingly in intent, but shrouded in such mystery that you don't quite know what it is, and it defies all natural laws. That's how I would describe cosmic horror. Now, it's a very easy genre to fuck up, but I gotta say Thomas Ligotti does it the best. I actually read Conspiracy Against the Human Race, which is his only nonfiction book, before I read his short stories. He writes short stories only, and he does them very, very well. And I'm glad I did, because it gave me sort of a guide to the allegory in his stories. He has a lot of reoccurring images and motifs, like puppets and clowns and masks and stuff like that. So I first felt pessimism resounding with me when I heard Matthew McConaughey's character, Russ Cole, in True Detective Season 1, which was one of the greatest viewing experiences for me. And then I found out that a lot of people are like, oh, well, Nick Pizzolatto, the guy who wrote the show, was heavily plagiarizing this book for Russ Cole's philosophy in the show. And I was really in denial about that for many years, because I was so in love with his character and the first season of that show. Third season's all right, but I've I've seen movie adaptations, and I've read Nick Pizzolatto's other works, and they really all pale in comparison. I mean, Ghost Birds was pretty good as a short story, but having read Conspiracy Against the Human Race, he's lifted lines like straight out of the book. Like, you know, it's without a doubt to a degree plagiarism. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't know, he was stealing all that much. You know, there's just like a few kind of lines and a few things that are sort of re-articulated, a few ideas that are re-articulated by Russ Cole's character. But in any case, that was my introduction, and it just resounded with me immensely. And here's the thing. You could make the argument, I'm sure a lot of people would probably get behind this, that pessimism is a result of people who have depression, neurochemical imbalance. Thomas Ligotti, he has depression to the point of anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure, plus chronic anxiety. He hasn't done an in-person interview despite being an award-winning writer for over 30 years. The basic tenets of pessimism, I would say, are number one, that consciousness life as a human is not a good thing, because that means we are aware of our suffering, and we are driven by our evolutionary mechanics. You know, we have desires that need to be fulfilled, but we also are cursed with this ability to reflect on what we must do to fulfill these desires, and the torment that comes with, say, not being able to do so, or being able to do so and not finding fulfillment. I think there are a number of ways that people cope with being conscious, self-aware, sentient beings. And this sort of ties into, I don't know if I'd make it a separate tenet, I'd say it's an adjunct to the first, but that consciousness, human consciousness specifically, is the result of nature making a massive blunder. And nature fucked up, and it gave us too much self-awareness, and that made us arrogant. You know, we learned how to make tools. We rely on those tools to essentially give us all the means in which we need to try to escape from being conscious beings, and to be able to survive apart from the animal kingdom, unlike animals, plants, marine life and so forth, who are driven just instinctually. Like, when I explain this to people, I usually use the analogy of watching footage of a gazelle being chased by a lion. The gazelle will run for its life because it wants to survive. And once that lion catches up to it, though, and has it, the gazelle lies down in defeat and just accepts the fact that it's about to be devoured. It's just the way of nature. We're not like that, because we have existential dread. And I would say that, at least for me anyways, existential dread, I'm far more scared of the pain that leads to death than death itself. But the fact that we are going to expire eventually is what causes a lot of this torment and this suffering. Now, another tenet of pessimism, at least, there are multiple variations on the beliefs. Schopenhauer's kind of the figurehead most associated with pessimism, the grandfather of pessimism, if you will. I would say I agree with much of what he says, but not as much as Ligotti or any. I don't agree with any other pessimist philosopher as much as Ligotti. But Ligotti cites a lot in his book, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race. He was actually this guy, he was, I believe, a Dutch, maybe Icelandic. He was a mountaineer, but he wrote one very powerful pessimistic essay called The Last Messiah. And it discusses a lot of these tenets, and also the means in which people use to, consciously or otherwise, cope with the fact that we are existing in pain, and existing in a way that has made us so detached from nature that we are damaging it. And the way we're damaging it the most, and this leads into the next tenet, is through overpopulation, mass procreation, something that again is hardwired into us by evolutionary needs, but really isn't necessary at this point. It's not the 1800s. It's not like 8 of your kids are going to die from tuberculosis. But people are still procreating like crazy. And it just baffles me, especially in today's climate. Why would you want to bring a child up in today's climate? One thing Ligotti posits is that it is selfish and almost as bad, if not worse, than taking a life, to pull a life out of blissful non-existence into existence, to force them to suffer, to force them to live under a series of delusions. And another thing that pessimism really gets into, especially Ligotti, and I would consider this a tenet, is our lack of agency, and how free will, as well as ideas such as freedom of choice, personality, individualism, all of these things are illusory, that we are essentially slaves to genetic programming and then conditioning, empiricism, our upbringing. And so in a kind of unconventional way, this is determinism. Determinism is usually a type of philosophy that's associated with notions such as fate and destiny. But this is saying, no, it's not fate or destiny. It's that we're not making decisions for ourselves. We're making decisions that are based on what we've been conditioned over the span of our biological evolution, as well as our cognitive development from the influence of those around us and our experiences that make the decisions for us, as well as our means of coping with being conscious. So I'll get into how people deal with these, and this is according to this Dutch mountaineer / philosopher in his essay The Last Messiah. You have A, distraction. So essentially distracting yourself by any means necessary from the fact that you have to, like it or not, be conscious of your life and your surroundings, your toils, your tribulations, your inner turmoil, your catastrophic situations that you may encounter throughout your life, the plights that we have been bestowed with, for me, and mainly chronic pain, years of abusing hard drugs, and really misguided way of trying to deal with this pain, and major depression. Those are a lot of factors for me. But others will distract themselves by any means necessary, and it's easier to distract yourself now than it ever has been with stuff like the internet. No, the second is isolation. So you isolate yourself from anything that reminds you that you're a conscious being. Third is anchoring. Now this is very common. This is, I think, what drives industries such as religion. And I refer to religion as an industry because these are things that are cash cows, or even nationalism, politics, just ideologies that we anchor ourselves, invest ourselves in as a way of making sense of the unnatural, which is our conscious awareness. And finally, according to Zappa, is sublimation. And sublimation, to give you an example, for Zappa, as I said, he was a mountaineer, spent much of his life exploring, and that was his form of sublimation. For Ligotti, for example, his writing is his form of sublimation. So essentially, you are channeling this distress through one medium or another, and this kind of ties into distraction and so forth. There's also another very interesting point that Ligotti touches upon that at first I thought was kind of absurd, but once I read into it a little bit further, it was like, oh wow, this actually kind of makes sense. And that is that out of all philosophical outlooks, pessimists tend to be the ones who are ostracized by society the most. For example, you go in to work, you say, someone says the same old, the tired old greeting, how are you today? And instead of going, oh, well, I'm good, I'm all right, you tell them how you really feel. Oh, I'm having a really hard time, blah, 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 blah. Like, if you give that negative answer again and again and again, people are just going to stop talking to you. People are not going to want to hear from you. And this is part of why I have this trepidation of making this video, because it's not exactly a thrill to hear, but I think these are realities that are obvious and that are hiding in plain sight, past all the things that are out there meant to divert us and scapegoat us from our existential dread, such as the massive campaigns against smoking. Like, cigarettes on average take 5 years off your life. Who wants that 5 years when you're fucking 80 something or whatever? Like, I've always called cigarettes gradual suicide, and I think there's a truth to that. I think people are, and this ties into another interesting notion that Ligotti posits in his book, which is the subconscious existing purely as a means for us to repress the harsh nature of our existence. We just shove it to the back of our mind, compartmentalize it there, and it builds and builds and builds in our subconscious, but we don't allow it to reach the surface of our mind. But yeah, going back to cigarettes, you know, you look at these mass campaigns that were, you know, instigated, saying these are bad, these will kill you, these will kill children, fucking these will corrupt children. You know, these are ways, I think, of, you know, you know, garnering praise and approval for whoever's doing the scapegoating, and B, it's making you think about all the other things that can kill you very easily on a daily or on a day-to-day basis, but that we don't want to admit, because if we do admit, we never want to leave the house. So I think there's a mass psychosis, if you will, when it comes to this, that we will, in a weird way, cope with the concept of death by focusing on, oh, video games will make people murderers, and those murderers will kill you. Exploitation flicks will do the same thing. Cigarettes will do the same thing. Drugs will do the same thing. You know, these are all misinformed ideas that are meant to dissuade you from acknowledging the actual truth. And I see this as the closest thing to truth. Yes, I am always skeptical. I am willing to admit that I could be very much wrong, but being someone who tried to feign optimism, who briefly tried to embrace nihilism, all these things, I've always found myself coming back to pessimism. And this is regardless of, you know, the experiences I've had on psychedelics, because, you know, like I had that one DMT video where I said, oh, no, I gotta change my channel's name now because I just had a spiritual experience. Well, hey, you know, that wore off pretty quickly, and I went, oh yeah, well, maybe that was just me, like, really experiencing a hyperbolic personification of my subconscious archetypes and whatnot. Because I think we do underestimate the depths of the human mind. Which, by the way, had my first macro dose of a long-lasting psychedelic last night. Did an Nexus flip with 22 milligrams of 2CB and 130 milligrams of MDMA, and it was a good time. I mean, it was the first time I've macro dosed in like 3 weeks, and I didn't have a bad reaction to it. So yeah, I'm pleased to say that more trip reports will be coming. Yeah, just to quickly summarize, because I'm going to segment these parts. Consciousness life is not a good thing. It is a curse rather than a gift. Ever since we were cavemen, Neanderthals, learned to work with tools, learned to figure things out, you know, implement technologies that can insulate ourselves further from nature, we grow more miserable. And second, being determinism through, you know, creating this illusion of autonomy, agency, free choices, free will, when really, you know, other people are making decisions for us. Other people have conditioned us to make our decisions. Our perception has led us to believe certain things to be true, certain things to be false. Yeah, our hereditary inheritance, if you will, of various tendencies, predispositions, makes it so that, in Ligotti's words, we are puppets to nature, nature and our environment, our stimuli, etc. So that's the second tenet. Third, antinatalism. Procreation is a bad thing because it is inherently selfish to pull a life out of blissful non-existence into existence to suffer until they die. I know it's a bleak one, but I think it's true. And Ligotti and Zappa, they very much stood by these beliefs and didn't procreate. Now, and then also, there's the means in which people cope with these things. So distraction, isolation, anchoring, sublimation, and finally that people who are pessimists, either through identifying themselves as so or just being cynical, tend to be disliked greatly by the public and are people who have been persecuted for a long time because they don't want to embrace the rose-colored glasses that most optimists wear, that essentially dilute themselves into believing that it is good to be conscious, that this is another example of why I don't like hanging around most trippers. I don't like hearing about consciousness expansion, enlightenment, all this shit, because I've done my fair share, and as I said, every time I feel like I've had a spiritual experience, it wears off pretty quickly when I come back to baseline and I ponder things a little bit more and go, oh yeah, maybe I was just fucking high. But anyways, I will leave this segment there, and I will continue another part if you guys really want to hear it. If this is too depressing, do let me know, and I'll leave it at this. But regardless of every experience I've had, I think these things are the closest to truth. But at the same time, I do embrace Robert Anton Wilson's maybe logic, which is essentially agnosticism towards everything until proven otherwise, which is that who knows what's real, so we can only make educated guesses on what is and what isn't. So I could be wrong. I could very well be wrong, but again, I keep coming back to this belief system because it seems the most accurate. And neurochemistry or not, there have been psychological trials that show people with depression seem to have a more accurate view of reality, because we again see past these blinders that people who are inherently optimistic like to adorn, so they can make it through life without totally acknowledging the miserable aspects of it, the anguish, the suffering of not just ourselves but others. And in a weird way, a lot of optimists, they consume a lot of mass media and stuff, which is very exploitative in itself. It's very much fear-mongering at its finest, and there's vicariousness through watching, say, a criminal get fucking taken down on cops, or alleged criminal anyways, even America's funniest home videos. Oh, watch this guy step on a rake and fucking break his nose. Isn't that funny? Ha ha ha. Like, there's I think there's an intrinsic sadism behind optimism and behind again, these various means that I cited, in which, you know, optimists, or even people who are kind of in between pessimism and optimism, even pessimists themselves, like, you know, with the whole sublimation thing, embrace as a means of denying harsh realities. You know, these apparent but very tough to swallow bitter pills of truth. You know, it's at least as close to truth as I can see, as I've found throughout my many attempts to embrace different ideas, you know, spiritual practices, so forth, all of which have fallen flat, but pessimism still resounds true for me. Now, I'm very keen to hear, you know, your thoughts on this matter. Ligotti, he has a very extreme solution to this, which goes beyond the distraction, isolation, anchoring, sublimation ideas that Zappa outlined in The Last Messiah, and that is that it'd be noble for our species to just commit mass suicide and eradicate ourselves from the planet. I doubt that'll ever happen, but he believes not only is that the most noble thing, other philosophers who are of the pessimistic mindset have said similar things, but they say we should kill ourselves and let nature be nature without us parasitically leeching off of it and you know, exploiting it for our own comforts and our own advantageous reasons that we may yield from you know, gleaning this or that from nature, and also that you know, we as a species have a penchant for just eradicating each other anyways, like you know, it's like a war is as old as consciousness itself, and if it wasn't for consciousness, would we have these frivolous wars? I don't know. But Ligotti, he says that not only should we kill ourselves, but we should kill nature too. We should take all life with us, because nature was the one who made this fundamental fuck up and put us in this position. Now, I think that's a little extreme. I think, you know, if anything, nature, if aware of its mistake, regrets it significantly. You know, it's impossible to say whether or not nature is aware of that. If it was, I think it would have taken us out a long time ago. But you know, that remains to be seen. There are many ways in which it can do so, but right now the most viable means of eradicating life on the planet is by our own means. You know, be it nuclear Armageddon, or you know, glaciers melting and releasing mass amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere, and, you know, creating such an exacerbated greenhouse gas effect that we essentially turn into a planet like Venus overnight, which is, you know, obviously inhospitable. Venus has a surface temperature of, I think, 450 degrees Fahrenheit, and it, you know, it rains sulfuric acid and it snows heavy metals. It's you know, being notoriously hard to actually explore, because most probes will burn up as soon as it enters that massive cloud in the atmosphere, which that cloud, with the sun heating up the entirety of the planet creates this oven underneath it, and like there's thousands and thousands of tons of CO2 under these ice caps that could be released any day, and it would probably be our fault because you may disagree with this, but I think man-made climate change or the acceleration of global warming is largely our fault. It's largely the fault of industry and our mass production, mass consumption, this wanton desire for materialism to continue denying the fact that we're conscious beings. But yeah, in any case, that's a lot to get into. Again, this is a video I've tried to make several times, but just haven't been A, satisfied with, or B, I've had my consternations about how you'll react to it, because it is at odds with what most people seek when they are, doing psychedelics. And my channel is mainly oriented around psychedelics. At least that's the content that people seem to view the most. I highly recommend the book Conspiracy Against the Human Race. Not if you are prone to suicide, because it will very, very much change you. Everyone I've encountered online who's read it has not been the same since. It's like in the Matrix, once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. It's a lot of very stark, shocking revelations about the nature of us, the illusions that have become sort of consensus gentium in terms of our outlook, and it's scary to think alone that we aren't autonomous beings who are making our own decisions, and that we are in fact inflicting a very awful punishment upon these bundles of joy we bring into the earth we call children. So take that for what you will, and I'm very fascinated to hear what your feedback might be. So anyways, I know a lot of my content, psychedelic or otherwise, is a means of self-help for myself, and I'm really glad that there's been a solidarity amongst me and other people, other viewers who have similar experiences, and in a way, because we're the only ones who can understand stuff like serious addiction and untreated concurrent disorder, stuff like that. I think it's a great thing, but it's also a means of sublimation. And so, you can regard this as self-help, or you can't, or you don't, and you choose not to. Whether that choice is up to you, I don't know. But yeah, take it for what you will. Catch you later. Bye.